They've appeared on radar, hovered over nuclear bases, and followed pilots across continents. These are not stories. These are military records, pilot testimonies, leaked documents, real cases the world wasn't meant to remember. Welcome to part 2 of our series, Aliens and UFOs, Phenomena Files. A journey through most compelling alien encounters and UFO incidents ever recorded. Each case is more disturbing and more verifiable than the last. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because disclosure doesn't come with a press release, it comes one file at a time. Number 31, Maury Island Incident. On June 21, 1947, Harold Dahl, a harbor patrolman near Maury Island in Washington State, reported an extraordinary sight, a cluster of flying metallic objects hovering silently over the water. As Dahl watched, one of the discs appeared to malfunction, releasing a stream of hot, metallic debris. The fragments rained down onto his boat, injuring his son and killing their dog. Dahl claimed to have taken photographs of the craft and collected pieces of the debris, but shortly after the encounter, he said he was visited by a man in a dark suit, an early account that would later define the archetype of the men in black. The stranger warned him not to speak of what he had seen. Days later, 2 U.S. Air Force intelligence officers, Captain William Davidson and First Lieutenant Frank Brown, were dispatched to investigate. They reportedly examined the evidence and interviewed Dahl. On their return flight, however, the B-25 bomber crashed under mysterious circumstances. Both men died, and much of the physical evidence was destroyed in the fire. The official conclusion: a hoax. The FBI closed the case, citing conflicting witness statements and lack of verifiable debris. Under pressure, even recanted his story, though some believe this was done under duress. Yet to this day, the Maury Island incident remains unresolved. Whatever fell from the sky that day left behind more questions than answers, and a silence that's lasted decades. Number 32, Kenneth Arnold sighting. On a clear afternoon in June 1947, a seasoned pilot changed the way the world looked at the skies. Kenneth Arnold, a 32-year-old businessman and experienced aviator, was flying his private Caller A to near Mount Rainier, Washington. While scanning the landscape for a missing military aircraft, Arnold spotted something he couldn't explain. 9 crescent-shaped objects flying in formation at remarkable speeds. He later estimated their velocity at over 1,200 miles per hour, far beyond any known aircraft at the time. What caught Arnold's attention wasn't just their speed, but the way they moved, erratically, like a saucer skipping across water. When he described this to the press, the term flying saucer was born, and with it, the modern UFO era. Skeptics quickly questioned Arnold's observations. Some suggested atmospheric mirages, migrating birds, or misidentified military planes. But Arnold, who had nothing to gain from the sighting, stuck to his account with a calm, detailed consistency that lent it credibility. Within days, similar reports began surfacing across the United States. The Air Force launched Project Sign, which later evolved into Project Blue Book, as officials scrambled to understand what had entered American airspace. Meanwhile, the public imagination was ignited. Aliens, secret technology, and Cold War paranoias swirled together in a potent mix of speculation. No physical evidence was ever recovered. Definitive explanation offered. But the sighting above Mount Rainier didn't fade, it expanded. And long after Kenneth Arnold touched down, Number 33, Japan Airlines Flight 1628 encounter. It was a routine cargo flight crossing the icy skies of Alaska, until something appeared beside them. On November 17, 1986, Japan Airlines Flight 1628 was traveling from Paris to Tokyo with a stopover in Anchorage. At the controls was Captain Kenju Terayuchi, a veteran pilot with over 10,000 hours of flight time. Somewhere near Fort Yukon, his crew noticed strange lights ahead, far too large and erratic to be from any known aircraft. As they watched, the lights drew closer. revealing what Terauchi would later describe as two small craft flanking a massive, walnut-shaped object estimated to be the size of two aircraft carriers. For nearly 50 minutes, the unidentified objects followed and maneuvered around Flight 1628, occasionally disappearing from sight and then reappearing in unexpected positions. The crew was disturbed enough to request a change of course. The FAA and NORAD confirmed radar contact with an unidentified object near the plane's path. After landing safely in Anchorage, Terauchi filed a detailed report. But instead of answers, he received scrutiny. Japan Airlines grounded him for speaking publicly. U.S. agencies quietly closed the investigation, citing no threat detected. The official narrative faded. But radar logs, flight recordings, and eyewitness testimony remained part of public record. The Arctic sky offered no answers, only silence and a path of questions that still lingers in the cold. Number 34. Hudson Valley Sightings. On warm summer nights in New York's Hudson Valley, thousands looked up and froze between 1982 and 1986. A quiet stretch of towns north of New York City became the epicenter of one of the largest UFO waves in American history. Witnesses described immense, silent craft hovering low over highways, neighborhoods, and lakes. These objects, often triangular or V-shaped, moved slowly, sometimes stopping entirely, and displayed brilliant white lights arranged in geometric patterns. In some cases, observers reported beams of light scanning the ground, or the eerie sensation of being watched. Unlike other sightings, these weren't isolated. On March 24, 1983, over 5,000 people are believed to have seen a massive, boomerang-shaped craft gliding across the region. Kyer families pulled over on roadsides. Police departments fielded hundreds of calls. Some assumed it was military, perhaps experimental aircraft from nearby Stewart Air Force Base, yet no official explanation was ever released. Others speculated it was a coordinated hoax by local pilots, though flight patterns and the sheer scale of appearances made this unlikely. The sightings continued for years, witnessed by skeptics and believers alike. But no conclusive photographs or radar evidence emerged. Today, the Hudson Valley UFO wave remains a mystery, buried under decades of silence. Were these events the result of secret technology, mass misperception, or contact with something beyond understanding? The night sky still stretches silent over the valley, but those who saw the lights never forgot. Number 35. Gulf Breeze Sightings. It began with a series of photographs, crisp, detailed, and unlike anything seen before. In November 1987, the small town of Gulf Breeze, Florida, became the center of intense UFO scrutiny. A local contractor named Ed Walters claimed he had encountered and photographed strange craft hovering above his neighborhood. The images showed saucer-like vehicles radiating light, suspended low in the air. Walters said the objects appeared multiple times, sometimes emitting beams, sometimes vanishing in a blink. More than 30 photos would follow, sparking a frenzy of interest from researchers, media, and skeptics alike. As word spread, others in Gulf Breeze began to report sightings of their own, glowing orbs over water, darting lights in the sky, and silent crafts drifting above treetops. MUFON investigators descended on the town. Air Force officials were silent. For a brief period, Gulf Breeze was treated as the UFO capital of the United States. Then came the controversy. A blue foam, model eerily similar to the craft in the photos, was discovered in a house once owned by Walters. Accusations of hoax followed, and skepticism grew. But to some, the sightings continued long after the media moved on. Witnesses unaffiliated with Walters described similar craft some even before his photos were published. Sometimes, a mystery doesn't vanish, just slips out of frame. Number 36. Chicago O'Hare UFO. It was a cold, overcast afternoon at one of the busiest airports in the United States, Chicago O'Hare International. But on November 7, 2006, another day in the skies became an event that still puzzles pilots, ground staff, and investigators. At approximately 4:15 p.m., employees from United Airlines noticed a strange object hovering over Gate C-17, described as a silent, metallic, disc-shaped craft gray in color and perfectly still. The object hung in the air for several minutes. Multiple witnesses, including flight supervisors and pilots, confirmed its presence. Some said it was about 20 to 30 feet wide, suspended below the cloud layer. No lights, no noise, just there motionless. Then, without warning, it shot upward at an extraordinary speed, reportedly punching a clean hole through the dense cloud cover. Witnesses claimed the gap remained visible for several minutes, near perfect circle in an otherwise unbroken, overcast sky, despite the number of credible witnesses. The FAA dismissed the event as a weather phenomenon, citing a lack of radar confirmation, but FOA requests later revealed that calls and internal communications about the sighting did occur, fueling speculation about what was seen that day. Above the busiest travel corridors in North America, something defied the known rules of airspace, and then it was gone. Number 37 Varginha Incident. In the quiet town of Varginha, nestled in the rolling hills of southeastern Brazil, something strange reportedly fell from the sky in January of 1996. What began as a local curiosity quickly escalated into one of the most controversial UFO encounters in Latin American history. Early on the morning of January 20th, local firefighters and military units were dispatched to the outskirts of town after reports of a strange creature roaming the area. Witnesses described a being with large red eyes, brownish skin, and an awkward gait, something neither human nor animal. Later that day, 3 young women claimed to have seen the creature crouched against a wall, apparently injured or disoriented. For the next 24 hours, local authorities cordoned off sections of the town. Eyewitnesses reported military trucks entering and leaving the area. Some claimed they saw soldiers carrying what appeared to be a body bag. Others alleged that at least one creature was captured alive and taken to a nearby hospital, later to be transferred later to a military facility. No photographs were ever officially released, and no government explanation fully addressed the range of witness testimonies. Brazilian officials denied any unusual activity, attributing the sightings to a case of mistaken identity involving a mentally ill man and a local zoo animal. Yet, the consistency of the accounts, along with the unusual military presence, has led many to question the official narrative. The truth, for now, remains sealed behind military silence and unanswered questions. Number 38. Voronezh UFO Incident. On a crisp autumn afternoon in 1989, the city of Voronezh in western Russia became the stage for one of the most detailed and perplexing UFO encounters ever recorded. On September 27th, local children playing in a city park reportedly witnessed a strange object descending from the sky. They described it as a massive, pink-hued, disc-shaped craft that landed silently in a nearby field. What followed, according to multiple eyewitnesses, including adults, was even more unsettling. A tall, humanoid figure emerged, accompanied by a smaller, robotic entity. The being, estimated to be over 9 feet tall, had a bulbous head, 3 eyes, and wore a silvery jumpsuit. The children claimed the figure briefly scanned the area before vanishing in, then reappearing again, almost instantaneously. The incident might have faded into urban legend, if not for the unexpected reaction of Soviet officials. TASS, the official Soviet news agency, published details of the encounter, citing statements from police officers, scientists, and psychologists who had interviewed the children. Further investigation revealed markings on the ground, elevated radiation levels, and unusual depressions in the soil, evidence that suggested something physical had, indeed, touched down. Skeptics proposed mass hysteria, or even Cold War-era disinformation, but unlike many sightings lost to rumor, the Voronezh case was treated with uncommon seriousness by state media and scientific institutions. Number 39. Trindade Island UFO. In January 1958, a remote Brazilian island in the South Atlantic briefly became the focus of a mystery that continues to puzzle researchers to this day. Trindade Island, a rocky outpost hundreds of miles off the coast of Brazil, was hosting a team of scientists and naval personnel conducting a geophysical study on the morning of January 16th. As the Brazilian Navy's training ship, Almirante Saldanha, prepared to depart, a photographer named Almiro captured what would soon become one of the most debated sequences in UFO history. 4 black and white images, taken in rapid succession, appear to show a metallic escaped object with a distinct dome flying over the island and disappearing behind the peaks. What makes the Trindade sighting especially significant is the number of credible witnesses. Military officers, scientists, and crew members, many with reputations at stake, attested to seeing the object with their own eyes. The Brazilian government initially confirmed the event, and the photos were published in national newspapers shortly thereafter. Even President Juscelino Kubitschek reportedly reviewed the case with interest. Skeptics later argued that the photos could have been faked or that the object was a weather balloon. Yet photographic experts of the time examined the negatives and found no evidence of manipulation. Himself, a former magazine photographer known for underwater images, maintained the authenticity of the shots until his death. Was it a craft of unknown origin, a misidentified natural phenomenon, or an elaborate hoax that slipped through official scrutiny? Whatever the answer, the skies over Trindade have remained quiet since, at least as far as we know. Number 40. Petrosavadsk phenomenon. Just before dawn on September 20th, 1977, the skies over Petrosavadsk, a quiet city near the western edge of the Soviet Union, were pierced by something entirely unexpected. Witnesses reported seeing a radiant object hovering high above Lake Onega, described as a luminous, jellyfish-shaped formation. The phenomenon emitted beams of light that extended downward like tendrils, casting an eerie glow across rooftops and water. For nearly 10 minutes, it remained nearly motionless in the sky before accelerating and vanishing toward the horizon. Its presence wasn't limited to Petrosavadsk. Similar sightings were reported from across northern Europe and parts of the USSR at the time. The Soviet Union was conducting satellite launches from the Plesetsk Cosmodrome, so speculated that the object was related to Cosmos 955, a military satellite launch that same morning. But witnesses, including scientists and air traffic controllers, argued that the object's behavior did not match known re-entry or launch signatures. Its stationary position, extended duration, and complex visual structure challenged conventional explanations. Soviet authorities opened an investigation, and the incident was even logged in an internal memo by the Academy of Sciences. Yet, despite official interest, no conclusive explanation emerged. Decades later, it remains one of the most credible yet enigmatic aerial events from the Cold War era. In a time when information was tightly controlled, the Petrosavadsk phenomenon quietly slipped through the cracks of certain till, leaving behind only blurred photos. Eyewitness accounts. Number 41. Ilkley Moor alien encounter. On a cold morning in December 1987, retired police officer named Philip Spencer set out across the fog-shrouded landscape of Ilkley Moor in Yorkshire, England, unaware that his walk would become one of Britain's most debated alien encounter cases. Equipped with a camera and a compass, Spencer was hoping to photograph the moor's quiet isolation. But as he climbed a ridge, he claimed to spot a small humanoid figure standing along the path, skin pale, its limbs unusually long, its head disproportionately large. As the being noticed him, it turned and quickly moved away. Spencer raised his camera and captured a single blurry image before the creature disappeared over the rise. Moments later, he reported seeing a craft described as a dome-shaped object silently into the sky. But perhaps most unnerving was what came next. When he checked his watch and compass, both seemed off. He realized that over 2 hours had passed, time he could not account for. The photograph was later examined by Kodak analysts, who concluded it had not been tampered with, though the image remained too unclear for a definitive identification. Spencer underwent hypnotic regression, where he described being taken aboard a craft and subjected to a kind of medical examination, though this memory, too, is disputed. Skeptics point to the lack of clear evidence. Supporters cite Spencer's background in law enforcement and lack of personal gain. What remains is a single, grainy photograph and a man's enduring clambering through the quiet hills of Ilkley Moor, where something may have briefly stepped out of the ordinary sky. Number 42. Broadhaven Triangle. In the quiet seaside village of Broadhaven, Wales, 1977 marked the beginning of a mystery that would ripple through the community and beyond. It began with a group of school children. During recess at Broadhaven Primary School, more than a dozen students claimed to have witnessed a silver, cigar-shaped craft landing in a nearby field. They described it in eerily similar detail, metallic, with a dome on top, and a figure clad in a silver suit standing beside it. The children were interviewed separately, yet their drawings of the object closely aligned. Skepticism followed, but the sightings didn't stop there. Over the following months, other residents of the region, farmers, hotel staff, even military personnel, reported strange lights, unexplained aerial movements, and humanoid figures in the area now known as the Broadhaven Triangle. Some described entities nearly 7 feet tall, with pointed ears and black suits, seen emerging from hedgerows or vanishing into thin air. To this day, Broadhaven remains one of Britain's most enduring UFO mysteries, triangle not drawn on maps, but etched into memory, and whatever passed overhead that year left behind no trace. Number 43. Berwyn Mountain Incident. On the cold evening of January 23, 1974, a quiet stretch of North Wales was suddenly shaken by an event that would become known as the Welsh Roswell. Residents near Berwyn Mountain heard a massive bang powerful enough to rattle windows and register on seismic equipment. Some described the tremor as an explosion. Others claimed they saw a brilliant flash of light streaking across the sky moments before. Emergency services, believing it might be a plane crash, rushed to the remote mountain terrain. But when they arrived, there was no wreckage, no fire, nothing to explain the disturbance, only silence and snow-covered hills lit by an eerie stillness. In the years that followed, the official explanation attributed the incident to a coincidental earthquake and meteor shower. But that didn't satisfy everyone. Eyewitnesses spoke of strange lights in the sky and military vehicles seen moving through the area under cover of night. A nurse claimed she was intercepted by armed personnel while trying to reach what she believed was a crash site. Classified Ministry of Defense files mention no recovered craft yet. Rumors persist of a retrieval operation and a cover-up hidden within the folds of Cold War secrecy. Decades later, the Berwyn Mountain incident remains a tangled intersection of natural phenomena, official denials, and deeply rooted folklore. But whether it was earthbound geology or something far more elusive still hangs unanswered over the hills of Wales. Number 4. For Cussack UFO Encounter. August 29, 1967. A quiet summer morning in the rural village of Cussack in southern France. 2 children, Francois and Anne-Marie, were tending to a herd of cows on a windswept plateau when something unexpected disrupted the stillness. According to their account, a strange object appeared in the sky, metallic, spherical, and hovering silently above the field. But what caught their attention more were the 4 small, black figures standing near it. The children described them as humanoid, with shiny suits and oversized heads. They moved with agility and, when spotted, quickly re-entered the sphere, which then emitted a high-pitched sound and rose into the air, vanishing into the distance at an impossible speed. Terrified, the children ran home. Their father, a local councilman, believed them and contacted authorities. Gendarmes investigated the site that same day. They reported an unusual odor like sulfurant, observed disturbed grass where the craft allegedly stood. The incident was logged and later investigated by French defense and aerospace officials. No clear explanation was ever offered. Unlike many sightings, the Cossack case had no obvious signs of hoax or attention-seeking. The witnesses were young, sincere, and consistent even under repeated questioning. And yet, beyond their words and the scent on the wind, there was no physical evidence. The truth, like the craft, vanished into the sky. Number 45, Rua, Zimbabwe, UFO. September 16, 1994. Midday sun blanketed the rural grounds of the aerial school in Rua, Zimbabwe. Children's voices echoed across the playground till something unfamiliar drew their eyes to the horizon. Over 60 students, aged between 6 and 12, would later describe seeing a silver disc-like object descend silently from the sky. It hovered above the brushland just beyond the school fence. But it wasn't just the craft that held their gaze. According to the children, small figures emerged, thin, black-clad beings with large heads and piercing eyes. Some of the children claimed the entities communicated with them not through speech, but through a flood of impressions and images, thoughts of environmental catastrophe, a planet in peril. The teachers, indoors during the sighting, initially dismissed the commotion, but the students were visibly shaken, some in tears. Their stories, recorded separately and immediately after the event, were consistent in detail. Notably, the late Dr. John Mack, a Harvard psychiatrist, would later interview the children, concluding they were sincere in not suffering from delusion or fantasy. There was no radar evidence, no adult witnesses, just dozens of young voices recounting something that, to this day, remains unexplained. Was it a mass hallucination? The answer lies somewhere between belief and memory, where testimony endures and explanation remains elusive. Number 46, the Valentich disappearance. It's the evening of October 21st, 1978. This began like any other along the southern coast of Australia till a single-prop Cessna vanished without a trace. Frederick Valentich, a 20-year-old pilot with a passion for aviation, took off from Moorabbin Airport in Melbourne on what he reported as a routine training flight to King Island. But what happened over the Bass Strait that night would spark decades of speculation. At 7:06 p.m., Valentich contacted Melbourne Air Traffic Control with an unusual report. He was being followed by an unidentified aircraft. "It's not an aircraft," he said moments later. The object, he claimed, was hovering, shining a green light and orbiting above him. For the next 6 minutes, the radio transmission grew increasingly erratic. Controllers recorded Valentich describing the object's rapid movements and mysterious metallic surface. His final words were chilling. "It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft." What followed was a long, metallic scraping sound, and then silence. Despite a multi-agency search effort, no wreckage was ever found. The sea remained quiet, the skies empty. The only evidence left behind was the transcript of a young pilot's bewildered final minutes. Some suggest disorientation, a hoax, or a tragic accident. Others believe he encountered something beyond human origin. Whatever the truth, the Valentich's disappearance remains suspended, like the object he described, between fact and the unknown. Number 47, Frederick Valentich's radio transmission. At 7:06 p.m. on October 21st, 1978, a young Australian pilot's voice broke through radiostatic.com at first, then laced with confusion. He said something was following him. Frederick Valentich, just 20 years old, was flying a rented Cessna 182L over the Bass Strait en route to King Island. A licensed pilot with 150 hours of flight time, Valentich had followed a proper flight plan and seemed well prepared. But what transpired during those final minutes of radio contact has puzzled investigators, aviation experts, and UFO researchers for decades. In a series of transmissions with Melbourne Air Traffic Control, Valentich described an object, metallic, with 4 bright lights, hovering near his plane. It's reported it moving at high speed, circling above, then vanishing and reappearing without warning. The controller tried to assist, but radar failed to confirm any nearby traffic. Vantage's descriptions grew more anxious. "It's not an aircraft," he said. Moments later, "It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft." Then came a chilling 17-second burst of noise, described in official transcripts as metallic, scraping sounds. After that, radio silence. No mayday, no wreckage. The Cessna and Valentich were never found. The recording has become a focal point in UFO circles and an enigma in aviation history. Was it a hoax, a misidentified aircraft, or something stranger? The audio exists, but its meaning remains elusive, as if the sky itself refused to give up its secrets. Number 48, San Antonio Crash Retrieval 1945. In the quiet desert outside San Antonio, New Mexico, 2 boys stumbled upon something in 1945, not long before the world would learn of the atomic bomb. COS 1945. The war was ending, and the nearby Trinity nuclear test site had already scorched the landscape just weeks earlier. On a small ranch near San Antonio, 9-year-old Jose Padilla and 7-year-old Reem Paca claimed they witnessed a fiery object crash into the brush. Curious, they approached the site and found what they described as an oval-shaped craft, metallic, partially buried, and damaged. According to their later testimony, they saw figures, small, thin, and apparently injured, moving inside the wreckage. They didn't know what to make of it. For the next few days, military personnel arrived, sealed off the area, and removed the object. The incident, the boys claimed, was never officially acknowledged. Decades later, Padilla and Baca came forward, supported by former military personnel and researchers like Jacques, who treated the account as part of a wider historical pattern of crash retrievals. Skeptics, however, point to the long delay in reporting and the absence of physical evidence. The San Antonio crash remains buried in a strange overlap of childhood memory, military secrecy, and the dawning of the nuclear age, a story whose edges still flicker in the desert heat. Number 49, Delphos Ring Incident. It began with a glow, an otherworldly light descending over a quiet Kansas farm. On the evening of November 2nd, 1971, 16-year-old Ronald Johnson was tending to chores on his family's property near Delphos when he saw a strange mushroom-shaped object hovering silently above the ground. According to Ronald, the craft emitted a blinding blue-white light and a low hum, hovered for a few moments, then abruptly rose into the sky and vanished. What remained behind was even more unusual, a glowing ring in the soil where the object had hovered. When Ronald's parents came outside moments later, they too observed the ring, described as a perfect circle of luminous residue, faintly glowing in the fading light. Investigators from civilian UFO groups and even the University of Kansas examined the site. Soil samples revealed a fibrous, hydrophobic substance resistant to water. And plants near the ring exhibited unusual dryness and discoloration. Some scientists suggested a fungus or chemical contamination. Others weren't so sure. The Delphos ring became one of the most well-documented trace cases in UFO history. Yet, despite the attention, no definitive explanation emerged. The physical evidence gradually faded, the family moved, and the farm returned to silence. But the ring, once burned into that Kansas soil, lingers in the records and in the minds of those who wonder how something so vivid could vanish without a trace. Number 50, Alligamer UFO crash in the remote countryside of northeastern Brazil. A story has lingered quietly, largely overlooked by the mainstream yet whispered among UFO researchers as one of South America's most enigmatic crash retrievals. It was in 1996, near the village of Alagama, in the state of Maranhão, when witnesses claimed that a strange, luminous object streaked across the night sky and descended into the dense, rural brushland. Locals described the crash as accompanied by a low, rumbling hum and a flash that lit up the landscape in an eerie, bluish hue. By morning, a group of villagers ventured to the area, expecting to find wreckage from a downed plane. Instead, they spoke of something metallic, half buried in the earth, warm to the touch, and unlike anything they'd seen. What followed, according to several independent accounts, was a swift and heavily armed military operation. Trucks rolled in. The object was reportedly removed under heavy guard. Civilians were warned to stay silent. No official record acknowledged the event. Years later, researchers investigating the case were able to track down scattered testimonies, though many locals remained hesitant to speak. The Brazilian Air Force has neither confirmed nor denied involvement. Some skeptics attribute the event to misidentified space debris. Others point to patterns. Similar retrieval operations in remote regions, always cloaked in secrecy. And so, the quiet fields of Alagama remained, untouched, unmarked, and unspoken, as if something extraordinary fell from the sky and was quietly erased. Number 51 Bonjour Station Lights. In the vast, desolate interior of Western Australia lies Bonjour Station, an isolated stretch of land that once housed little more than livestock and dust. But in May of 1993, it became the center of one of the most peculiar and unsettling aerial phenomena ever reported on the continent. On the night of May 28th, witnesses, ranchers, Aboriginal elders, and even a pilot reported seeing a brilliant, pulsing light rise from the direction of Bonjour. It moved with uncanny precision, hovering silently before launching across the sky at immense speed. One local described the light as a massive ball of fire that made the ground tremble. Another noted how his compass spun wildly as the object passed overhead. Moments later, a deep rumble was heard, and a shockwave rolled across the desert, rattling structures hundreds of kilometers away. What makes the event even more unsettling is what was discovered later. At the time, Bonjour Station had been quietly purchased by Om Shinrikyo, the same Japanese doomsday cult responsible for the Tokyo subway sarin gas attack in 1995. Their presence in the Australian outback raised questions. Why were they there? What were they testing? And did the light have anything to do with seismic readings that registered that night as far away as Perth? To this day, no official explanation has been provided. Government sources attributed the tremor to a minor earthquake, yet no fault line activity was detected in the region. The light, the sound, the vibration all remain unaccounted for. And in the silence of the desert, the land still holds its secrets, as if something passed through and left only questions behind. Number 52 Manises UFO Incident. On the night of November 11, 1979, the routine flight path of TAE Flight JK-2297 veered into the realm of the unexplained, forever linking Spanish airspace with one of Europe's most compelling UFO encounters. The aircraft, a Super Caravelle jet en route from Salzburg to Las Palmas with a stopover in Mallorca, was cruising at 29,000 feet when Captain Francisco Lerdo de Tejada noticed red lights rapidly approaching from the east. The objects weren't visible on radar, but they maneuvered with an intelligence that defied explanation, matching the plane's altitude, closing in, then keeping pace in eerie silence. Fearing a collision, the captain requested an emergency landing at Valencia's Manises Airport, the first time in Spanish aviation history that a commercial flight had diverted due to an unidentified aerial phenomenon. As the jet descended, military radar at nearby air bases also detected anomalies. In response, a Mirage F-1 fighter was scrambled. But even the high-speed military jet, piloted by Captain Fernando, failed to intercept the elusive lights. He later described the objects as performing maneuvers beyond the capabilities of any known aircraft, accelerating away at astonishing speeds whenever he drew near. The Spanish government launched an investigation, while official explanations pointed to atmospheric or radar anomalies. Those involved civilian and military alike remained unconvinced. What, then, navigated so deliberately across the skies of Spain that night? And why did it choose to engage in that fleabee for vanishing without trace? Over 4 decades later, the Meneses incident remains unsolved. A quiet chapter in European airspace, still awaiting its final report. Number 53, Waynock Reservoir, UFO. On a bitterly cold January night in 1966, something strange hovered over the icy waters of New Jersey's Waynock Reservoir, an event witnessed not by 1 or 2, but dozens of people, including police officers. It began shortly after sunset on January 11th, when local patrolmen reported a blinding, bright white light moving silently above the reservoir. The object, according to multiple radio dispatches, darted across the sky with unearthly speed, pausing at times to hover motionless over the frozen surface. One officer described it as emitting a beam so intense it seemed to cut through the night air, illuminating parts of the reservoir below. As reports flooded in, residents joined the officers on the shoreline, watching as the objects, sometimes described as oval, sometimes as a luminous sphere, maneuvered with deliberate precision. Attempts to contact nearby military bases for radar confirmation went unanswered or were met with denial. The light eventually vanished behind the mountains, leaving behind no wreckage, no brazenly unanswered questions. Some attributed the sighting to reflections from nearby highways or atmospheric anomalies. Others were less convinced, pointing to the credibility of the witnesses' trained law enforcement officers, all describing the same extraordinary event from different locations. But if it wasn't a natural phenomenon, technology hovered that night over the waters of Waynock. And why was it there silent, watchful, and gone in an instant? The reservoir remains calm today, but its reflection once held a mystery that has yet to be explained. Number 54, Levelland multi-vehicle shutdown. On a dark stretch of West Texas highway in November 1957, engines began to fail one by one. Cars, trucks, and police cruisers all came to a silent, inexplicable stop near the small town of Levelland. It started shortly before midnight, when a truck driver reported seeing a glowing torpedo-shaped object hovering above the road. As it passed overhead, his engine stalled and headlights died. Minutes later, another motorist experienced the same and then another. Over the course of a few hours, more than a dozen independent witnesses contacted the sheriff's office, all reporting a nearly identical sequence: a bright object in the sky, followed by a total vehicle shutdown, then the sudden return of power once the object vanished. Even law enforcement wasn't spared. Officers dispatched to the area watched their cruisers' lights flicker and die as they approached the glowing craft. Radio communications were scrambled. What made this event so unusual wasn't just the number of witnesses, but the consistency in their accounts, many of whom had no prior contact with one another. The Air Force's Project Blue Book ultimately attributed the Levelland incident to ball lightning or electrical storms, despite clear skies and calm weather that night. Critics called it a convenient explanation that ignored the technological specificity of the failures. If natural phenomena were at play, why did it affect only vehicles and only in the presence of an object no one could identify? Decades later, Levelland remains a rare and unnerving moment where machine and mystery collided in the dead of night. Number 55, Yukon UFO sighting. On a frigid December night in 1996, the skies over the Yukon Territory lit up with something no one could explain, something massive, silent, and unlike any known aircraft. Dozens of witnesses across multiple towns, including Fox Lake, Carmax, and Pelly Crossing, described the same thing, a gigantic object, shaped like a flattened triangle or rectangle, moving slowly and silently across the frozen sky. Some estimated it to be nearly a mile long. Its surface was dark, outlined only by rows of softly glowing lights, white, amber, and sometimes blue. And despite its size, it made no noise. It's just an eerie, deliberate glide. The sightings were reported within minutes of each other from locations over 200 kilometers apart. Many of the witnesses were longtime northern residents, familiar with the night sky and familiar with aircraft hunters, truckers, and law enforcement officers. Their descriptions matched with uncanny precision. Some watched the object for up to 15 minutes before it disappeared behind the tree line or vanished into the night. The Canadian government never offered a detailed investigation, and no conventional aircraft was reported flying in the region at that time. No military exercises, no known satellites re-entering. Just silence both from the sky and the authorities. What kind of craft could move that slowly, with no sound, across hundreds of kilometers and be seen so clearly by so many? In the stillness of the northern wilderness, the Yukon sighting left behind no crash, no evidence. Only questions suspended in the cold winter air. Number 56. Cumbergas video footage. Along the shores of the Sea of Marmara, in the quiet town of Cumbergas, Turkey, a series of nighttime sightings would give rise to what some consider the most perplexing UFO footage ever recorded. Between 2007 and 2009, a security guard named Yakin Yaman captured hours of video using a digital camera with a powerful zoom lens. The objects he recorded weren't the fleeting lights typically dismissed as aircraft or satellites. These were structured forms, metallic, hovering low over the water, often with semicircular contours. Under magnification, some frames appeared to show what resembled silhouettes or figures inside. The footage was analyzed by Turkey's Scientific and Technology Research Board and other independent investigators. No evidence of tampering was found. The video format was consistent with the original device. Even a Chilean Air Force committee later reviewed the tapes and called them among the most credible examples of unexplained aerial phenomena. Skeptics have proposed theories ranging from optical illusions to reflections off boats, but none fully account for the repeated, multi-year nature of the sightings nor the physical details captured in the images. To this day, the Cumbergas footage remains a rare case in the UFO archives, a prolonged, documented encounter captured from a fixed location with witnesses present. But whether the lens revealed something extraordinary or simply played tricks beneath the moonlight remains unresolved, like the horizon where sea meets sky. Number 57. Japan Airlines Flight 1628 Incident. Over the frozen skies of Alaska, in November 1986, a seasoned Japanese airline crew encountered something that would defy explanation and challenge the limits of official aviation accounts. Japan Airlines Flight 1628, a cargo flight en route from Paris to Tokyo, was cruising at 35,000 feet when the crew spotted unidentified lights off their port wing. Captain Kenju Teruyuchi, a former fighter pilot with over 10,000 flight hours, was the first to report the anomaly. What he described was no ordinary aircraft. Three distinct objects, two smaller and one massive, appeared to maneuver in tandem with the plane, even changing positions and emitting bursts of light. For nearly 50 minutes, the encounter persisted. The larger object was later described as the size of two aircraft carriers, with metallic features and no discernible wings. Despite the presence of radar signatures confirmed by U.S. air traffic controllers and military radar in Anchorage, ATIA, no official interception was made. The Federal Aviation Administration conducted an investigation. Teruyuchi was grounded temporarily, though his story never changed. FAA officials later admitted that radar data supported the pilot's claims, but the U.S. government offered no further public explanation. Was it a case of misidentification amplified by atmospheric illusions? Or did Flight 1628 stumble into controlled airspace of something far less familiar. Skies above Alaska have long carried secrets. This may be one of them. Number 58. Pope Air Force Base, UFO. On the night of January 18, 1975, deep within the secure perimeter of Pope Air Force Base in North Carolina, something unexpected reached the darkness, something that radar couldn't explain and guards couldn't ignore. Shortly after midnight, military personnel stationed at the base's munitions storage area reported a silent, glowing object hovering just above the tree line, described as oval-shaped and emitting a bluish-white light. The craft appeared to move without soundifying the typical characteristics of aircraft monitored in controlled airspace. According to witness statements, the object maneuvered with an intelligence that made some believe it was observing the base itself, particularly the high-security weapons storage site. Security teams scrambled, fearing an incursion or espionage attempt. Yet, radar at nearby Fort Bragg and NORAD installations reportedly detected nothing unusual, and attempts to track the object with searchlights or intercept vehicles yielded no results. Within minutes, it vanished. No sonic boom, no visual trails, just silence. In the aftermath, the incident was quietly documented by the U.S. Air Force's Office of Special Investigations, OSI, while the official conclusions suggested an atmospheric anomaly or misidentified aircraft. No plausible source, military or civilian, was ever confirmed in the area at that time. For those stationed that night, the event remains deeply etched in memory. Secure base, advanced surveillance, and trained eyes, all left with more questions than answers. What kind of technology can bypass military-grade detection? And more importantly, who was behind it? Number 59. Charles-witted UFO encounter. It was just past 2 a.m. on July 24, 1948, when two experienced commercial pilots, Captain Clarence Childs and First Officer John Whitted, guided their DC-3 passenger plane through the calm skies over Alabama. What they saw next would become one of the earliest and most debated encounters in modern aviation history. Without warning, a glowing object approached from the left at tremendous speed, described as a cigar-shaped craft nearly 100 feet long, with a double row of illuminated windows and flames trailing from its rear. The object passed within 1,000 feet of their craft before pulling up sharply and disappearing into the clouds above. Both men described it in near identical detail, later sketching the same shape independently. Air Force investigators took the sighting seriously. This wasn't the account of civilians or casual observers. It was a report from decorated war pilots, both trained to estimate distance, speed, and aircraft behavior. Military radar picked up nothing, and no known aircraft could match the object's description or maneuverability. The Air Force's Project Sign initially labeled the encounter as unidentified and even considered the possibility of interplanetary technology, till conclusion was revised to weather phenomenon or meteor, despite the witness testimony indicating an object with structure and control. Yet one question remains unanswered. If what Childs and Whitted saw wasn't a meteor, then what was flying over the southeastern United States that night at such impossible speed with such silent precision? Number 6. ORB-47 UFO encounter. It began as a routine reconnaissance mission at 34,000 feet, but within minutes, the U.S. Air Force crew aboard the RB-47 would find themselves tracking and being tracked by something unexplainable. On the morning of July 17, 1957, a 6-man crew departed from Forbes Air Force Base in Kansas, flying an RB-47E outfitted with sophisticated electronic intelligence equipment. Their objective was standard: monitor Soviet radar frequencies across the Gulf Coast. But as the aircraft crossed into Mississippi airspace, the onboard sensors picked up an unusual signal, one that didn't match any known radar signature. The object wasn't just visible on electronic surveillance. Visual contact was made by the pilots, who reported a glowing, pulsing light maneuvering with precision at incredible speeds. The unidentified object followed the RB-47 for over 700 miles, at times vanishing from sight and sensors, only to reappear moments later, sometimes ahead of the aircraft, sometimes behind. Air traffic controllers on the ground also confirmed the radar returns, validating the crew's claims. Attempts to outmaneuver the object failed. Then, as suddenly as it had arrived, the anomaly vanished without a trace. Multiple forms of detection, visual radar and electronic, had all converged on the same conclusion. Something was in the skies that defied the known laws of physics and technology of the time. Despite numerous investigations, no official explanation has ever satisfied the details of the encounter. Decades later, the RB-47 incident remains one of the most thoroughly documented and most perplexing aerial phenomena in U.S. military history. If the skies were being watched that day, the question is, by whom? 30 more encounters. 30 more reasons to question everything we thought we knew about our skies when contact isn't hypothetical, but documented. In our next series, we go deeper into abductions, recovered materials, and phenomena that defy even alien logic. Until then, archive this moment. Because history may not believe it, but the data doesn't lie. Like, comment, and share if you've heard of even one of these. If not, imagine what else is out there.